everybody. Good evening. Thank you. Or sorry, good afternoon and good morning, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. I'm just looking to see. Jill, can you see me? Okay. Let's see if we can get our host up onto the screen. Right. Hello, Jill. Can you hear me? Oh, yes. Hello. Hi.
So, yes, that's good. So now I'm sharing my screen.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, welcome everybody. Sorry about that little technical hitch. Can you just put in the chat box that you can hear us, that you can hear both me and Jill. You could just confirm that. That would be brilliant. So I'm assuming that everybody can hear. If anyone's having any difficulty in hearing, can you just pop that in the chat now? Hi. Welcome from Ghana. That's lovely. So we will start at 6 o'clock, but in the meantime, if you want to introduce yourself, then that will be lovely. Please do use the chat throughout the webinar. Jill is very experienced in everything that we're going to talk about today, and so she will be able to answer your questions, or at least if you pop in the chat box something that we're not covering, it gives us an idea for webinars that we might cover in 2026. So please do use the chat and engage with the content as we get to it. At the end of this webinar, you will receive a certificate. You'll receive a copy of the slides, and also you will get some downloadable resources which you can share with your parents and with your colleagues. Now, I'm just going to put a web address into the chat. If when you download the resources, you think, because I've given you options for grades or years 1 to year 6, if you think, oh, actually, I'd really like resources that are more resources applicable to a particular year group, just email us and we can make more available for you. Right, it's now time to start the webinar. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jill. Jill Budgell is director of her own company, an educational consultancy business. She's got over 30 years experience of education as a teacher, a publisher, researcher, writer of early years and primary English language and literacy resources. We've worked with Jill for a long time. She's helped us develop and publish many of our resources. And I just want to say that she is an expert in this field. So please do make sure that you take advantage of having her with you for the next hour and pop any questions that you have into the chat box. So I'm just going to hand over to Jill now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for those kind words. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. It's this evening in the UK. I was in Dubai just a few days ago, but I am back in the cold today. And it's wonderful to see people from all over the world, actually. I'm already looking at Spain and South Africa and Oman and Ghana. So you're all very, very welcome. I've always been fascinated by language and literacy, and you'll notice I've put including phonics on this initial slide. And that's because we talk about language and literacy, but in the last few years, we've become rather phonic obsessed. And so I wanted to sort of broaden it a little bit, thinking about how we help parents to get their children ready for school. And in this broad arena of language and literacy, but of course, including phonics, because we know that's one of the really important skills. So that's my agenda. I'll talk for about 50 minutes, and then if there's questions, do put them in the box, as Amanda said, and then we'll try and catch up with those at the end or as I go through. So I don't know if any of you were attending I think it was last week or the week before, the parallel webinar about mathematics and math skills. Let me know in the chat box if any of you did, but my colleague Debbie spoke about preparing for school, getting children ready for school. Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Someone from Alicante said no. But Debbie had a screen very similar to this. It was preparing for maths literacy and math skills. And she had maths is all around us. It's engaging. It needs to be playful. It's hands-on. And I thought, let me duplicate that screen because as we know in early years, whether it's nursery or kindergarten, what we know about the best practice there is that we're not separating things out into different subjects. Even though we're talking about language and literacy here today, and the previous one was maths, we know that these things embed and enmesh together, and they're better for the child when we do that. So I copied her slide to say language is all around. We can say this to parents. It's engaging. Doesn't need to be a slog. It can be really fun and playful. And if it's hands-on, then the learning is active, which we also know is really, really powerful. It's the bedrock of their world. I mean, it's the bedrock of our worlds too. Learning our language, whether it's our first language or whether it's our second or third language, you can't do anything without language. So this is really, really critical that we help to draw our parents in to work more closely with us. And this bottom one is interesting because I think a lot of parents think that it's all about reading and phonics. And of course, it's not just about phonics and reading. So on this slide, you can see that I want to look at the broad spectrum, the whole picture of listening and speaking, reading and writing. And I want to look at the element of both teaching the code, the alphabetic code of the language, understanding the nuts and bolts, as well as the meaning. And ideally, you have both. And I'll talk a lot about that as we work through. But our goal is this lifelong pleasure, but not just for reading. We want children to be able to speak and listen confidently, to read and to write. And along the bottom there, you can see we're talking about not just speaking, but speaking clearly, knowing and using vocabulary really well, enriching vocabulary, getting children to listen well. Listening and then mimicking is a really important part, as we know, in early years. We want to teach children how to read. That's back to that code element, which is the phonics. But we want to teach them how to write letters and handwriting. And we want to teach them how to spell. So one of the key things I'm really keen on sharing with parents is the breadth of language and literacy that they can help us with, that we can work with them on. So and these are my other little reminders, that I think sometimes parents think that learning is a straight line. Learning is not linear, as we know. Those of us who work with young children, we know that they might know something one day and then they don't know it the next day. And then next week, they might have it in their grasp again. And that's constantly why we are revisiting and consolidating activities in our teaching. So there's ups and downs and forgetful moments, just like us when we're learning something new. And I think it's useful to share that with parents. And also that progress isn't A to Z. It's not just, can you recognize your name? No, and then yes. As we know, the progress is granular. The little tiny steps. And any of you who are using early years frameworks or curriculum frameworks, do let me know in the chat if you are using any published early years curriculum frameworks, for example, or whether you've devised your own. But the important thing about those kind of frameworks is that we're absolutely defining those little steps along the way, not to be constrained, but so that we appreciate when progress is made. And you can see this is a really nice example here across, if you look at these pictures, we think about the importance in print awareness of a child knowing their name. Don't be shy. Do put in that chat box if any of you are using a framework, because it's really useful to know what people are using. So we go from, does the child need some visual clues to help them? So you can see here we've got little photos of their heads by their coat pegs. Or do they need their visual clue alongside the written name so that they can make that link? And can they only find their name in the classroom or at home on their toy box if they've got something to match to the name on the box? Or can they begin to look around and say, that letter is in my name, or that is my name, and increasingly begin to recognize the letters and or their name in a growing range of contexts. So these are they're just small examples of how we can move children on by supporting them and then gradually encouraging them to notice the print and make the link with themselves. And in fact, then begin to recognize other people's names. So these are the small wins that we're really concerned about. And we need to tell parents this, because I think sometimes they're looking for big, huge steps of progress. And actually, we need to celebrate those small wins. Thank you. Yeah, a few people have said in the chat that they are. Nadia said she is using a framework. She hasn't said which one, but we can talk about that in a little while. So what I wanted to do today, I thought I've presented this kind of topic so many times before, but I wanted to go back in and look at some research, some new research. And I asked AI, and I did my own research, what are the 10 most impactful activities that we can do with early years children? Which are the ones that we're going to really benefit from? And can we then share elements of those with parents so that what they do in their very precious time, because obviously a lot of them are working, they don't have much time, let's make sure that when they do sit down with their young children, they're doing things that are really going to make a difference. And I won't read these out, but these are the 10 things that I settled on after I'd done my various research. And one of the key websites that I used is something called the Education Endowment Foundation. I'll pop that in the box. Education Endowment. Endowment Foundation. I noticed there was somebody here from the UK. And so that person may well know of this site. But if you Google that site, they have a fantastic early years section and they flag new research. And it's really practical. It's not highly academic. It's really sensible stuff that you can read and think, yeah, I'll do that. So if you don't know it, do have a look at that. So without further ado, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about these 10 things. And you'll see that it's not just reading, it's across listening and speaking, reading and writing. So let's think about the first one, which was an interactive read aloud activity. What does that mean? Parents, often have perhaps a storybook to read to their children in the evening, before bed or after supper. But is it just about sharing the book and reading the book to the child? Often the children can't read these books for meaning. These are rich picture books with rich language that would be difficult, but the children enjoy the pictures and the repetition, and you can draw them into joining in. But what we really want to do is stress the meaning of these books and ask questions, engage the child. So I was thinking about these aren't new techniques, actually. Do let me know if you know these techniques. I remembered peer and crowd. These are acronyms, PEER and CROWD. And they encourage us to, I can say this to you as teachers, but we wouldn't be using this language with parents. This is about dialogic reading. How do we share books with children to draw them in and get them chatting and exchanging? How can we help parents to ask those right questions? Well, I thought it would be useful to return to this model. So let me know in the chat, if you will, if anyone knows of these techniques. I'm sure some people do. So if you do, I won't spend a lot of time on it. Or is this new? Do let me know. Meanwhile, I'll carry on. P is for prompt. E is for evaluate the child's response. E is expand on what the child said. And R is repeat and connect. So the examples, I really love these examples that I've managed to find here. So the parent might say, or us as teachers, we might say, oh, what is that? So that's our prompt. And the child might say, oh, it's a balloon. And we evaluate and reinforce that response by saying, that's right, it's a balloon. But then we can expand on that by saying, it's a big red balloon, or it's a red balloon. We saw one of those in the grocery store today, or we've got one like that in our playroom. Thank you. Some people are saying, yes, they know the technique. That's fantastic. Thank you. So, and then at the end, we can say, can you say big red balloon? And this, we repeat and we revisit the prompt. Now, we wouldn't present this to parents clearly, but I think there are some things in here which it's not difficult that we could say to parents, don't just read the book to the child, and we could model how we would ask these kind of questions so that they can share it. It's interactive. The parent is reading, the child is reading, and they're chatting about it and using vocabulary. And these are the things that work most effectively. Let's have a little look at the next one, which is crowd. This is again a little bit more sophisticated, but you don't have to use all of these. But it's useful to think about, have I ever used completion? So, for example, we might be reading a book about a bear and we might say, the little bear went to the, and the child says market or woods. It's fantastic. So we've got them hooked already. And then we might recall. Let's ask a simple literal question. What did the bear find in the woods? Child answers. We might ask an open-ended question. What did you think the character was feeling when he went into the woods? We might ask a WH question. Again, tends to be open-ended, doesn't it? A who, what, where, when. So we might say, why did the character decide to go into the woods? Why do you think he did that? Or in the distancing letter, we can ask the child, critical this is, to connect the story to their own lives. Did you ever go into a wood? Did you ever see a bear in the wood? Have you ever felt lost like the character did? Garda has said the technique is extremely useful, especially with students who have weak English skills. Absolutely, yes. Thank you for sharing that. I hope I've got your first name there, not mispronouncing it. But thank you for sharing that. You see, it's a small structure that even as teachers we find really useful to remind ourselves, not just to say, "Did you like the book? Can you point to the picture?" It's a way to open it up into more a dialogic, interactive read aloud. And I don't know if you agree. I mean, different parents are at different levels of English and have different amounts of time. But I think even if we experiment over the course of the year, the children are in early years, we can say, try asking this question, you know, when you're working with your child. And even if a few of the parents are doing it, I think it would really elevate that reading experience. So this is one of my key points, really, this interactivity, and it happens to be here with reading. So the next type of activity that I'm very keen on, that I know is impactful and should precede phonics, we need children to play phonological awareness games. I think I may have. Yes, sorry, I thought I'd jumped one. So that the phonological awareness, which again, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is about hearing, identifying, playing with the sounds in spoken language. So it's not phonics, it's different. And many of the things we know already, the kind of games the language games that many of us know, we can play with the children to encourage them. And again, we can show parents how to do this. So instead of I spy with my little eye something beginning with B, we can say, I can hear with my little ear something beginning with wood or something. So we can play with these games that are familiar already. And Simon Says, I don't know if you know that game where you say Simon says, point to something that begins with, and the children can point to something in the classroom. But if you don't say Simon Says, the children shouldn't point. But you can change that. You can adapt these games so that the children are really listening to hear, identify, and play with the sounds of the spoken language. Garda has also added a comment, which, sorry, I just want to go back to. I recently started using the crowd technique, and I noticed that the students pay more attention in class and don't feel bored. You pronounced it perfectly. Oh, thank you very much. So that's a lot. I guess you can see that in the chat box. That's really nice feedback as well. I think that's right. I think variety is important, isn't it? So that it gives us a structure to be more varied. Okay, so I'd already shown you this slide. So these are some more ideas, a little bit more phonically based. So parents might, if they're reading a rhyming story with their child, this obviously then is perfect. So you could say something like, do these two words rhyme? But it doesn't have to be linked to a book. You could just be driving. They could be driving along and say, I'm going to say two words and you have to tell me if they rhyme. Ham, jam. Do they rhyme? Yes, they do. Or you could show parents how we pronounce the letter sound. So they have to orally blend. They're hourly listening and orally they're blending what they hear. What word am I saying? It. And the children can be thinking, oh, sit. Oh, they can hear the word sit. And then you can say, do it. And then they can sit down. So you could show parents how we could play these games at home. And depending on their confidence. But I think the more parent workshops we can run, and I know it's difficult to get parents to come in sometimes, but if we can model these games, I think it's lovely. They just need 5 things to do, don't they? And to gain confidence. Here's another one, a bit more sophisticated. Can you hear the air sound? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Air. Can we hear the air sound in air? Oh, yes, we can. Yes, we can. What about stare? Air. Oh, yes, we can. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Surf. Oh no, thumbs down. No, we can't hear. Doesn't have to be thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you signal. But using these kind of very simple games and showing parents, even perhaps jotting them down on a little sheet that can go home so that they get the idea, or share these slides. You're very welcome to share these slides. So phonological awareness games, really, really impactful, really important that get tuned in. And of course, that leads to learning letters and sounds. So here we are at phonics already. Grapheme, phoneme, correspondence. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. Let me know in the chat if you are using a phonic program. Let me know. The last group earlier were good about sharing that. It's interesting to know what people are using. But grapheme is the letter shape. Phoneme is the letter sound. Teaching children how the two work together is the basis of phonics in very simplistic terms. And I'm sure you know this. I'm sure you know this already. No one is not very often. Okay. Someone else is saying, Esra is saying yes, using phonics. What are you using? Let me know what you're using, because you can see here on the screen I've put SatPin, which is probably the most well-known initial letters that are taught in a phonic program. Because we don't teach phonics in alphabetical order, we teach letters that are best used side by side so that once the children know them, they can build words really quickly. So we teach s, not s. We need parents to understand that we say the sound as purely as possible in English, which is a challenge if it's their own, it's a second language or second or third language for the parent. It's really, it's a tall order, but we need the parents to understand that we say s, at. You can hardly hear me say that, probably. Mm. We're not saying n or t or pa. Yeah, Pardo has said, yeah, Jolly Phonics Group 1. Yeah, Jolly Phonics is a hugely popular program. And Macmillan has Snappy Sounds, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about in a moment. Obviously, there's old programs like Letterland, which are also updating these days. We've got a huge choice as teachers, and that's fantastic. So it doesn't have to be SAPIN, but it does have to be a program that you follow. And when you've chosen it, you stick with it, because consistency is absolutely essential so that this teaching is impactful. That's really important. Thank you, Reem. She says we use Letterland in school. Yeah, and I agree, Siham, I hope that's right. Yeah, it's difficult. Vowels are really difficult and challenging with bilingual or multilingual learners. And it does take a little bit more time, and that's why the pace of these programs is actually really important, and it's why we need parents to help us as well, because we need help. And we're not blocking mother tongue by any means. If they're working on some of those games that we were just talking about, phonological awareness in their first language, their home language, that's great. That's all part of developing their early language and literacy skills. But if we can bring parents with us a little bit, then teaching these letter sounds, with actions and connecting them to the sounds, Ezra has suggested, that's really helpful. But have fun as well. So, we've got some silly sounds in English, difficult sounds that make us feel a bit silly, or, zzz and f. But we can have fun with the children. And I think if they're laughing and playing, which is what we want them to be doing with the language, then they're less self-conscious. I've put a picture of bubbles here, a child blowing bubbles. I hope you can see that. The research has shown over a long period of time, again, this isn't new, that motion of blowing is a really useful way to encourage children to move their mouth and manipulate their tongue and their teeth. And there's a lot to negotiate for young children to be able to produce these sounds. And blowing bubbles is apparently a really, really fun way that we can help children to practice. Many programs give guidance, as we know, on how to move the mouth to make each of the sounds. So we say E or S, and how the mouth works. So make sure that the program that you have does give you guidance on that. And if not, look to another program for guidance on it, because it's really important. So learning letters and sounds. So we talked at the beginning, let's just do a little time check. Oh gosh. Okay. We talked at the beginning about lovely storybooks and reading for meaning, and that interactive read aloud, getting the children involved, not just so that they're passively listening, although sometimes that's nice, isn't it, to hear a story. But we also need books for learning the code, learning the alphabetic code, the phonics. So this is a snapshot of the Snappy Sounds reading program. And you can see, you'll recognize this if you're using other programs. You'll see it's color-coded, it's leveled, the books are in order. Each book represents a number of sounds that have already been taught. The letters and the sounds must have been taught so that children can then use them to read the words in these decodable books. We call them decodable books, and I'm sure you're familiar with that term. You can see the books are really attractive. They aren't as rich as the picture books that we started with at the beginning. They can't be, because we're controlling the language in order to encourage the children to read them independently. And as we know, that the success a child feels when they can pick up an English book, particularly if they're in a second language, and they can read it, or they can have a really good try at using their phonics to read, is fantastic. So it's very important that we teach both the code and the meaning, the richness of the language. Garda has said, teaching phonics, I got magnetic letters, and I would say the phonic blend and have the students place the letters together using the magnets and have them say it. Absolutely. And in fact, we'll come on to that in a minute when we're talking about moving on to writing and spelling, because the reading and the writing are, of course, two sides of the same coin. And if we're asking the children to put the letters together, that's actually, we're asking them to spell the word. If we're showing them the word and asking them to say the letters, to blend the letter sounds in order to read the word, then obviously that's reading. Thank you for sharing that, Garda. So let's move on. So we've covered a little bit about reading, but storytelling, retelling, and pretend play are invaluable. And this kept coming up in all the research I did for this webinar. I think it's one of the things that perhaps parents need reminding about, because I think the tendency is they think it's all about reading, either picture books or phonic books, and they forget that they can do so much to help us by encouraging the child to take it in turns. Taking it in turns is more effective than just one person doing all the talking, reading or writing. And that is the mantra through this webinar, that it's the taking turns and the interactivity that makes the activity impactful and effective. So you can see, we can, you know this, we can do this. This is, we say bread and butter, the bread and butter of early years, really, isn't it? Little puppets, little finger puppets or stick puppets. There are so many ways that we can build the vocabulary and the understanding of language. Here's a little aside. I don't know if anybody knows this Instagram account. It's at stories by 2+1. I hope you can see that on the screen there. And it's two parents. I think they're based in the States with their little girl, who's a very capable, articulate little girl. But what they share is their fun with language and literacy. So you can see on the left that she's asked, the father has read something and she's correct. Look at the way she's holding her pencil to correct him, because she's telling him his pronunciation isn't correct. And you can hear the language she's using is the language she's heard at school, and she's brought it home and is using Daddy as a pupil. And then in this video on the right, she's pretending that she's an office manager. So it's a little role play. And I think it's the mum that comes in and says, oh, I have a hospital appointment and I would like to take some time off to go to the hospital. And she pretends to be the manager and decides whether she's going to let the mum have the time off to go to the hospital. These kind of scenarios, whether they're fantasy or whether they're like the manager scenario, which she plays very well, are really, really effective ways to encourage children to use their language. I think we set up shops, don't we, in cafes and things. But I think to show parents, if we can, some models of what other parents do can be really exciting and supportive, actually. They think, oh, okay, yeah, we could do that. We could set up a cafe and I could pretend to be the customer and my child could come and serve me and ask me what cakes I want and so on. So storytelling, retelling and pretend play definitely remind parents that this is all valuable in the journey to their language and literacy. And part of that is we want rich words and great conversations. We don't want basic, I mean, if they're learning English as a second or a third language, then we do have to be mindful to control our language. I do understand that. But gradually, we do want rich words and we do want to have great conversations with children. Again, it's that taking it in turns. And some of the things that I picked up, again, this is from the Education Endowment Foundation. They were talking about the importance of sometimes teaching vocabulary explicitly, which I guess we would do a lot with children who are bilingual or multilingual. So naming and labeling something explicitly, this is a cup, you say cup. Explaining and showing to support children's understanding of a key word or concept. So that's also explicit. Come over here, let me show you the fish tank. Let's look at the fish. And so you're giving the child some sort of framework for the vocabulary or the repetition of keywords throughout the day or over time. So if you've got a project going on, making sure that we explicitly repeat that new language. These are explicit ways that we can enrich children's use of vocabulary. But at the bottom there, you can see it says implicit practices include using comments to highlight a key word, or imitating a child's use of key vocabulary, or adding additional words to extend it. So, this might be something like, yes, come and look at the fish tank. What can you see? Using those peer and those crowd, you could use those questions, those prompts, what can you see? How many fish can you see? Yes, that one's blue. Can you see a pink one or whatever? So just taking the language on a notch, even if the children are learning English, is very powerful because it gives them good models, and it's fun. And if they respond in their first language, fantastic. It shows that they've understood. You'll be very, very aware of the value of that. So, vocabulary has proven to be a really important part. You won't be surprised to hear that. Here we have something that none of you, again, will be surprised about: singing songs and chanting rhymes. It was the same 30 years ago, 40 years ago when I was teaching, saying rhymes, singing, reciting little finger plays, which is also good for fine motor skills, of course, or using our arms for gross motor skills, clapping the syllables to chanted words. My name is Jillian, or the wheel on the bus, the wheels on the bus, or their own name. Can they clap their name? That's another important aspect of that name work that we were talking about earlier. It's away from the print, but do parents realise that even when children are at school, these aren't just things that we do when they're 2 in the nursery. These things have ongoing value. So don't drop the singing when you're in the car. Encourage them to sing together and chant their rhymes. And again, maybe they'll be in the home language. Fantastic. Use songs for alliteration and rhyme to identify sounds and change them. So Incy Wincy Spider is a favourite, with the climbing up the spout. I don't know if you know those kind of rhymes. Or the wheels on the bus. I know it. Pretty much everyone all over the world knows the wheels on the bus go round and round. We have things like run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. But can we change some of the words? Can we have some fun with good morning, sun? Maybe we can say good morning, bun, and have some funny sentences. So these things, I don't know if you agree. I mean, do say in the chat box, but I think sometimes when children start school, parents get so wrapped up with the formality of reading and writing that they forget, or perhaps don't know, that these things must come forward with those formal skills. It's really important that we keep that going. And who doesn't love a sing-song? It's really good fun. So I'm not quite sure what number we're on now, but I am slowly working through my 10 most effective activities, most impactful activities. This is something that I think gets lost sometimes and is really easy for parents to enjoy doing with their children. Environmental print exploration. Who does this? You've all gone very quiet, so it would be lovely to hear from some people. Who does environmental print exploration? We're talking about interacting with print that we see around us, so that children understand that print has meaning in our daily lives. It's not just something we do in school. Helping them understand the function and the purpose. How could we do that at school? No one is talking to me. How can we do that at school, or how could parents do it at home? I've put some clues here in the pictures. And do you agree that environmental print exploration is something that remains important as an impactful activity? You can see here. Thank you, Reem. Yes, showing them photos of real life signs during the morning circle. Lovely. Yes. Yes. Thank you, Siham. Yes, I strongly agree. So it's important because it supports letters and sounds, which we know is phonic work. It can develop and support vocabulary, print concepts, understanding that print carries meaning, which they need to know for reading and they need to know for writing. Fabiana, thank you. And also for emergent writing. So it's really important that parents also understand the value of that. So again, they're going to the shops, they're picking up their carrier bag, they're doing their shopping, they're reading the prices, they're reading the labels on food. And this is a very easy way that parents can help. It's not a difficult thing whether you're in the car or in the supermarket. But I think, again, in the rush, it sometimes gets left out. But I'm not suggesting that children need a clipboard and a tick list as they go round, although that would be fantastic. But generally, parents' lives are very busy, so they might not have time to do that. But certainly just, you know, making children aware that the parents are buying things based on what they're reading on the packets, I think is hugely valuable. So thank you for talking to me a little bit about that. And this is another one that, if we are doing print awareness activities, we don't want parents to think that they've always got to buy something really expensive. I think somebody earlier in the chat box was saying, that, sorry, I can't remember who it was now, was using these little magnetic letters. These are really, really fun and really, really useful to have. But if parents don't have them, you could just as easily write them out on an A4 sheet of paper and cut them up into little letter tiles on paper and use those. We don't need parents to spend a lot of money. If you're on the beach, look what we can do here. We can write the alphabet. Why not? And we can trace it with a finger, or we can collect some little stones. This is sort of about noticing the shape of letters. We've got shells here that are making a letter. So if the parents are at the beach for the weekend, why not have this kind of print awareness on the beach? It doesn't have to be heavy. It's fun. Afsana, thank you. Yes, you can use anything, buttons or seeds. Ask the child what they'd like to use. So it's really not about buying expensive letters, or it's not about necessarily having an expensive phone or a tablet. We can really do things in the backyard, on the beach, in the woods, and using recycled stuff as well. Siam has just added. Yes. And I think, again, sometimes I feel like parents almost need us to give them permission to be creative with their children. And if they only knew how valuable it is that they're almost whatever they do with their child, if they're being interactive with them, is really helpful. But it's that interactivity, taking turns. So you can see that research really strongly confirms that developing this understanding of print concepts, that these letter shapes carry letter sounds, and when they put together, they make words, and the words have meaning. And also the importance of recognizing the function of letters and words and directionality. That's a really important one, isn't it? Because if the home language is a right to left orientation, as in Arabic or Urdu or other kind of languages that have that direction, then we need to teach that English is left to right. Um, so that's a really important one in this context where you're often teaching bilingual and multilingual children. And it's critical, it's a critical foundation skill. So let's not forget the importance of that. Anam's made a lovely comment there that parents are often surprised when you suggest simple ideas. I think that's right. I think that's right. I think they think there's some mystique or magic around what we do in school, and we don't want them to feel that. We don't want them to feel intimidated by it. Um, so any of these ideas, I think I've mentioned earlier the value of parental workshops. I know how difficult it is to get parents to come in the evening, but the opportunity, or even in the day, you know, if you host reading or sharing sessions or drop-off sessions, it's so valuable, isn't it, to be able to model the kind of simple things that we would value. But I guess we can send them home with little worksheets, just giving some simple activity ideas along the lines of some of these things. So yeah, really, really important to do that. We're in the last few activities now, and we're sort of turning our attention a little bit more to writing. So remember at the beginning, I talked about progress isn't linear. Learning isn't linear. Progress is often granular, little tiny steps that show that a child is moving along. And I asked you if you're using an early years framework, whether you're happy that the framework you're using is actually helping you to identify those little steps along the way. Because again, we need to share these with parents. So here's a nice example linked to gross and fine motor skills. Let's remind parents that playing with a hoopla in the garden or the backyard or the park can actually help their child with their motor skills to prepare them for early writing. It's not just that they're playing with a hoopla. And if they can't run around a hoop, like this little chap here with the blue hat, they probably won't be ready to pick up a pencil or even a crayon, even with that kind of grip, to make a circle on a piece of paper or in paint. So you've got to have the gross motor skill, usually, before you can finesse the fine motor skill. So you can see it's a lovely sort of series of pictures here of a child playing with the hoopla and then working with their hands to create finger painting, and then holding that pencil grip, you know, like with that very toddler grip, which is the grip that precedes this tripod grip that ultimately we would like children to move to, certainly by the time they've got to the end of kindergarten and into year one. So again, sharing that with parents, that those things, catching and throwing a ball, really valuable gross motor skills, really important for preparing children for the writing. So that was a little reminder. And ultimately, we then lead into mark making and early writing. And again, sometimes this gets left out because we're so fixated on reading and sharing books and loving books and learning phonics. But of course, as we said, reading and writing are the two sides of the same coin. They really go hand in hand together. And patterns, just like gross and fine motor skills, learning patterns and copying patterns and exploring, creating pattern is crucial as a precursor to developing early writing. And it's not just pens and pencils, is it? We can say to parents, maybe get out a big decorating brush with a pot of water and paint the garage door. That's gross motor as well as making patterns with the water in the sun, and then of course it will evaporate, or a stick in the sand on the beach. What patterns can we make? Eventually, of course, we would love children then to be able to, this little chap here is holding a pencil, and you can see this teacher has put out some really quite sophisticated pattern cards and has given the child this, this is another one from Instagram, has given them little sections. So can they choose a pattern and fill a section with that pattern? So do parents realise that pattern making is a very important part of early writing? I think maybe sometimes they don't. I love this piece of research, which has come from the Education Endowment Foundation that I mentioned, that's based here in the UK. One skill over and over in isolation is less effective than when it's integrated with activities and demonstrations and feedback. It makes sense to us as teachers, but you know, I think a lot of parents, when they don't have very much time, they might say, write your name 10 times or write this letter over and over again until it's really neat. There is a time when children are older when we perhaps do need that kind of repetition. And some children love that repetition, but actually not when they're little. I think one skill over and over in isolation doesn't sound like much fun. And we do want learning to be fun and active and engaging. So I think that's a really important message. And there's lots more about that on the EEF, Education Endowment Foundation website. And of course, ultimately, we do want children to form their letters correctly. We do the gross and fine motor skills. We do all sorts of fun activities, and mark making and pattern awareness. But the goal is letter formation and understanding that these are the graphemes. There is a correct way to write the graphemes in English, just like there will be in other languages. And whether you choose this font and this formation doesn't really matter. This one is from Snappy Sounds, and it's based on Pen Pals for Handwriting, which is a Cambridge handwriting program. But there are many others, and it doesn't matter as long as the one you choose you use consistently, so that the children have a fair chance of understanding that this is how we write this letter. So, mark making and early writing, we can support parents by providing the model of the letter formation that we want, but not if they're going to ask their child to write that skill over and over in isolation. Remember, we want to encourage them to make it fun. So we don't want to go too quickly. And this is got 10 minutes to go, so we're doing quite well, and hopefully we'll have time for some questions at the end. This is a lovely piece to finish on because we've come all through the interactive reading of meaning and the code and the listening and the speaking. This is about sharing the pen, and really it's interactive writing, which again is probably not a new idea, but it has been shown to be highly effective with young children. Let me know in the chat box. Thank you, Manuel. Awesome, that's lovely. Do let me know in the chat box. Is this something you're familiar with? This phrase, sharing the pen to write the message together, or interactive writing? Is this something you do already with your children? And is it something you think you could confidently share with parents and ask parents to do with their children? They probably do it without knowing they're doing it, to be honest. I'll keep an eye on the chat in case anybody wants to offer anything. But if you think about a parent and a child, the child's going to a birthday party, perhaps, and they've chosen a birthday card. The parent, I'm sure, would sit down with the child, and together they would say, oh, we'll write to, whoever, to Siham. And what shall we say? Shall we say, have a lovely birthday, or I'm excited to see you? Oh, okay, well, I'll write. What do you want me to write? So the parent could be writing what the child says, or she could say to the child, have the pen. You can write your friend's name. And even if they're only mark making, then it shows that it's taking it in turns, and it's almost sort of making it dialogic, to go back to that terminology from the reading. Ezra is saying, yeah, interactive writing, yes, but that's the first time to hear about the sharing the pen. It's a lovely phrase, isn't it? Sharing the pen. I'll write this bit, you write that bit. Oh, well done. What did you say? You know, if they've made marks and um, you can't read actually what they can tell you what they wanted to write. And you can see here on the right, I found this example from quite a nice website of some preschool writing. Now, we don't know what the teacher put in here. They eat frogs. They're learning about hawks. They eat frogs, rabbits, snakes, bugs. Maybe the children are suggesting these things. You can see some children have added little pictures. Some children have come up and added perhaps some. It's mark making, but it could be writing. Um, our hawk's name is Minnie Hawk. Um, it's a really lovely. So you end up with something that is collaborative, and the children can feel proud, and they can show their parents when they come into the classroom if it's something you've been doing in school, or indeed if they've done it at home, then the children could bring it in and show you that they've been doing some writing at home with mummy or daddy or an older sibling. And the research around this is really impressive. It really, really elicits talk and makes children more confident to have a go and to believe that they're a writer or a reader. So yeah, if you feel like having a go, then share the pen and see if you get some fantastic results, and then work out ways that we can share that with parents so to give them confidence. So I think our time is nearly up. We've just got a few minutes left. So these were my 10 most impactful activities. Um, as I say, in some ways they're not new. I'm sure, all very experienced teachers, and I'm sure that many of these things you've heard about, or as you said, you know of them, but not. Maybe we're using different language to describe them now. And does that mean it's a slightly different activity? But I think to make parents aware that these are the things that really are going to help their child, not just sitting with a worksheet, or not just watching the TV, or not just watching a game on their phone or the tablet, but the talk that accompanies the activities is the really powerful thing. Obviously, I haven't mentioned digital literacy at all in this webinar, and I did that deliberately, and I'm absolutely in favour. I mean, there's so many benefits to children engaging with digital learning. But what I wanted to stress in this webinar was for parents who are busy, and we are all busy, that sometimes just finding that bit of extra time to engage with the child, even if it's on the phone or on the tablet, but leaving the child for too long with that alone is not the most impactful activity, even if the activity on the screen is superb. It's the interactivity and the taking it in turns that will make the difference. So I think we've got lots to learn there in terms of getting the best from digital technologies. So that's all I'll say on that. We could do another whole session on embedding digital technology. So later on, next week, we've got the webinar where we are hoping to talk some of these ideas through with parents. So do encourage your parents to come to that. Amanda will tell you more about that in a moment. I think the message we want to give parents is that we want you to work with us. All the evidence is that the outcomes for the children are far better when it's a collaborative exchange between us as professionals and the parents with their child. The child is the most important thing between us, and that really we can give all sorts of tips about what they can do and what they what's most effective, but whatever they do makes a huge difference, because they're engaging with their child. So better together than not finding time to do anything, even if it takes us a long time to get parents on track, and we're suggesting different things each week perhaps. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for joining me and for offering so many lovely ideas and giving me feedback. It's quite lonely sat here sometimes, so it's lovely when people do put things in the chat. Sorry if I nagged you to do that, but it's really lovely to see your comments. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you very much. Thanks, particularly to everyone who put all those great ideas in the chat box as well. It's lovely to share and to collaborate on your ideas in school. Jill, thank you. That was a really fascinating and engaging session as ever. Just to remind you that on the 9th of December, so next Tuesday, we will be running two webinars again during the day with Jill and also with Debbie Roberts, who is our maths and science specialist. So we will be going through primary maths, science, and literacy and giving out their expert advice, hints and tips on how to engage how parents can engage their children in helping you really with activities that they can do at home. So please do encourage your parents to come along and listen, and also you're very welcome as well. So thank you all very much indeed for joining us. Whatever time of day it is with you, I wish you a very enjoyable rest of the day, and thanks again, Jill.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you. Thanks for
everyone.
your comments. Bye everyone. Bye bye.